the #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.
Good morning, guys, and welcome to episode 185 of Costa Rica Real Estate and Investments with me, your host, Richard Beckson. Today, we're going to be talking with Jerry Werth. We had Jerry on the podcast, it must have been over a year ago. Jerry is the owner of Pura Vida well drilling. And I wanted to get him on just because, well drilling is a big thing here in Costa Rica. As you've heard me talk about, water is everything. So we're going to get a little bit technical with Jerry and also get into some new technology out there, which is pretty interesting as well here on finding water sources. I always say to people, don't buy anything unless it has a valid water letter. There are some exceptions to that, guys, and we have worked with quite a few of you and I'm getting those exceptions where we've got concessions on rivers, where we've hand-dug wells. You just need to, again, be careful around those kind of things. So, but thanks very much. Quite a few of you have actually been reaching out to us, which is great. Remember, anyone that needs any help with anything in Costa Rica, people sometimes ask us like, hey, what do you do? I think to summarize it, we are kind of owners reps on everything: finding land, buying land, architecture, design, finding the right architect, finding the right construction company, making sure the construction is done properly, making sure you find the right property manager. Basically, if you have an idea of something to do in Costa Rica, I'm sure that we can get it done for you. And if we don't, put you in contact with someone that will. As I always say, I'm a sucker for helping people. So please, guys, let me help you. info@investingcostarica.com. info@investingcostarica.com. But let's get straight into the podcast. Good morning, Jerry. How are you doing?
Good morning, Richard. Thank you. Very well. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you again. I really appreciate you taking time to come on the podcast here. And I know we're going to cover some exciting topics here. But the question that I like to always get started with, just to give kind of, I suppose, people an idea of like, what's happening here, volume of work, kind of the finger on the pulse of Costa Rica. I mean, compared to, I would say, Q4 2023, I mean, how is Q1 2024 looking for you, Jerry?
We're busy. There's a lot of active projects going on.
Yeah.
I would say that we've seen an increase in the last 6 months.
Wow.
With active projects, definitely.
So, I mean, you're typically in the initial stages of a project, right? Meaning that you guys are kind of in that water stage, which is vital here in Costa Rica. I've covered multiple podcasts on, like, again, if you do not have legal water here, like, you can't do anything.
It's essential, Richard. I'm the first guy you need to call. When you get off the plane, you call our company. Okay.
Well, and it's so confusing as well, Jerry, because again, there are some again, there are setbacks, there are things you can do, things that you can't, there are processes you have to go through. But I mean, maybe you could just give us an idea of just generally, the options available to people in order to get a legal water source here in Costa Rica.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'll start off with the preferred method. And I look at, there's groups of people that come down, and we're seeing all different groups, and we're seeing families move down. Not just the family with the kids, we're seeing generations moving down, and they're buying large parcels of land, and they're building their little compounds. You have couples that are just building a luxury home. You have investors, obviously, that are building projects. And my first and foremost, my favorite well for a water source, and excluding springs and excluding river concessions, it's always going to be a drilled water well for private use on one piece of property. And that is a private system that you have complete control over. You don't have to worry about any type of government entities coming in and making things complicated. Now, the drawback to that is that two planos or two separate properties can share that well. That's the max. There's not anymore. And there's always these stories going around, and I hear it weekly, and I've been listening to it for over 15 years but somebody told me I can do 5 properties, or somebody told me I could do 10. And I just heard it from an engineer, the other day. And he's telling me that he was going to go to Sala Cuarta and fight and get, 15 concessions. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So that's my favorite. That's what I have at my house. That's what I recommend for people. Now, if you're an investor and you're wanting to purchase land and build out properties, my number one favorite is build the project out as a horizontal condominium. And horizontal condominium in our language, in the US, that's a subdivision.
Yep.
And there's certain construction methods that you have to follow. You have to follow underneath the guidelines of INVU. And you have to do things like curb and gutter, overhead lighting, entryway sometimes. It's a nice project. It's
Yep.
absolutely a nice project. Now, when you're a horizontal condominium, you can drill one well, and according to your master plan, you can provide water to every lot on that property. And the horizontal condominium also allows you to segregate your property into much smaller lots. So, for instance, if you're going to have an agricultural lot, which we call an ag lot here,
Yep.
that would be a farm for somebody. That would be no less than 5,000 square meters. You cannot segregate the property smaller than that. With a horizontal condominium, you can take lot sizes all the way down. I've seen as small as 200 square meters. So you really develop out the entire project with a well thought out planned master plan. And the water in the project maintains ownership by the association of the condominium.
Yep.
So no problems, no outside influences, again, with government or other entities. And now the third, and it seems like the most popular that everybody just conglomerates to, and we spend a lot of time working with clients on this, is that you can take your project and you can segregate it into 5,000 square meter lots, and then you build out the entire water system and you donate it to what's called an ASADA. An ASADA is a local water board that is governed, well, regulated by AIA. AIA is like our federal Department for Water Resources in Costa Rica. And people love that because they're always sold on it's going to be fast, right? And they're not going to have to do that many things. They're not going to have to do curb and gutter, and they're not going to have to do overhead lighting. The reality is they are going to have to do fire hydrants. They are going to have to do a technical study. It isn't a super fast process. And I think the difference between a horizontal condominium project and an ASADA project is maybe 6 months, maybe a year longer, but the benefits outweigh the hassles, so to say.
Yeah.
And one of the problems that we see with when you're connected to an ASADA, it's the way that they've regulated ASADAs. Now remember, an ASADA is a rural water board, okay, that's actually a corporation, which we would call ASADA. So it's a private business that basically sells water to the public under the guidelines of AYA. Now, what happens is that most of these water boards are ran by local volunteers. You have wealthy investors coming in that need water from this local water board, and that's when it gets really complicated.
Oh, I think I know. I think people can read between the lines, Jerry.
Right.
I mean, yeah, and every ASADA works differently and has different agendas. Like, I mean, I just had a great, experience up in Aranao with the Water Association up there.
Right.
And it was great. I needed water for 2 agricultural lots I had, and I had to pay the engineer to do the study. He came back, then the ASADA came back and said, "Hey, pay me $20,000 for 2 water letters, basically."
Yeah.
And I just had to go and buy the materials, and they gave me my water letters. Actually, I should be getting them today. Actually, I hope so.
Yeah. No, and it is it's a good system. It could be so much better, so to say, because the whole reason for an ASADA is for the government to control people from selling water, well, from distributing water without any type of regulation.
Yeah.
And ASADAs like you're talking about, and let me back up a little bit, because and I'm not saying that ASADAs are bad. I'm saying ASADAs that you just need to be aware of how they operate, right? And you have 2 different types of ASADAs. You have ASADAs that have a convenio with AIA. That means they have a chartership with AIA. And then you have ASADAs that don't have a convenio. And where you need to be very careful is that the ASADAs that don't have a convenio with AIA, they're pretty much doing whatever they want. They don't need to get anything approved with AIA. And where the protection for the landowner is when you donate this water system to the ASADA and you're looking to get and churn 100 water letters, you want to have backup that, in 5 years when there's another board in that ASADA, that you're not going to have problems. And they're constantly switching people, right? So those are the things, and that's how we help clients. We have a group of 4 individuals that are from different companies. We have an engineering company, obviously us, topographer company. We have a negotiating company that goes and negotiates things between the client and ASADA. The engineers will make sure that the technical studies that you just mentioned are approved by IEI, not just the ASADA. And when everything gets put together on the table, there's an attorney that puts everything written down, signed, so that it's a good concrete plan. I had a client that just winged it with an ASADA near Jaco. It was near Jaco, and he made a deal, and the ASADA said, yeah, let's hook up your project to our ASADA. So he spent a little over $300,000 and ran water line all the way up to near Villa Caletas.
I know the project and I know the individual. Yeah, I mean, it sucked, dude. Sucked. Like, that's horrible. Like, he put in all that investment and didn't get those water letters.
He didn't get his water letters, and it's not his fault. It's just because, there's a big. Costa Rica is the land of secrets when it comes to the proper way of doing things. And it's not written in black and white, and you have to have experts knowing what to do. And that just takes experience, and you have to pay for your education in Costa Rica. And that means, you got to be here a while.
You've got to take your licks. You got to lose some money. And this is, I always say, I mean, you mentioned it's not the country of black and white. It's gray. There's a lot of gray in everything here. Like, there might be black and white written down, but that's not how it works. And like, people sometimes don't get that like, it's written down black and white. So why doesn't it work like that? And I'm like, I don't have an answer for you. It's just, this is the way it's done. It's funny, Jerry, though, because people are willing to put millions of dollars in land, but are not willing to hire consultants to make sure that they are making the right decisions in that, in that investment. It kind of seems foolish sometimes.
I can't figure it out, Richard. I don't. It just seems like Americans. Well, no, I don't want to say American. Just foreigners in general. They get here. They're under this adventure mode, And I remember when we came here 23 years ago, I was like that for about 6 months. You just love everything. It's green. There's toucans flying, and the way you feel really connected to the local people, and you just want to you just want to love everything, it seems like. And the thing is, you need to do your homework. You need to get references. You need to see, look, you contract with somebody here, you check out what they've done. You talk to the people they've worked with. You see if it was successful or was not successful. Because the mentality here a lot of time is like, oh, but I can do that for you, Richard. And I'm only going to charge you half. And the first thing we say is like, oh, great. Yeah, let's go for it. Be careful, guys. Be careful.
I mean, I get surprised every so often, but it's like 1 in 20, and it's like finding gold for me. It's like, I recently found a great carpenter up in the San Ramon area, and he delivered stuff on time and exactly how I wanted it. And I was like, where's the catch here? And then I started to give him more work, and he's still delivering on time, but we need to go and sit with him, because we're giving him so much work now that we have to sit with him and be like, look, have you planned this out with everything? Because he was just a carpenter, and now, it's taking on a lot of work. So we just wanted to make sure that he structured his business and timing and everything ready. He doesn't start missing deadlines, because dealing with another home finish there, where a big company here has completely missed a deadline by 2 months on furniture. But anyway,
but it's become a lot better, though. The level of professionalism has increased tremendously after COVID. Yeah. So I mean, they're catching on. People are catching on. You gotta provide customer service.
I mean, just jumping back to your point on a condominium, I completely agree on, instead of subdividing agricultural lots, you can still do a condominium with lot sizes large if you want to. I mean, it makes no difference. The good thing about it is you actually have a formal HOA, where you can have rules and regulations on how big a house, how high, what color it's to be, etc. Which some people don't like, but I kind of look at it and go, look, it protects your asset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no other way. If I came to Costa Rica and I was retiring and I wanted to buy a pre-build and not go through the construction process, it would absolutely have to be horizontal condominium. Your investment's protected. You don't have to worry about the guy. Container homes are so popular here now.
Yep.
And I seen, I go see these projects and the guy's got $1 million home and the guy next to him just put a container home up. I'm like,
Yep. On
yeah,
agricultural parcels, you can do that,
right,
but in a
right,
condominium, you cannot.
yeah,
So, well, Jerry, some interesting stuff's, been happening, I suppose, over the past couple of years. They keep shooting satellites up in the air, which I understand, has changed your business quite a bit. Maybe you could just give us a bit more information on how, you guys are using technology and finding water in Costa Rica, because, everyone's like, Costa Rica has tons of water, just the infrastructure is not great.
right.
And it used to be people used to, go out there with the rods and etc. I mean, give us an idea of kind of, I'm sure that you're not running around with rods, like kind of what technology you guys are using.
You'd be surprised though. It's like
Hey.
once a week, you don't have the little rods on you, do you? I'm like, no, I don't have the rods
Yep.
on me. No, it's, I'll make this very brief, very short. And it's just a little bit about my history. I moved here in 2001 and I came here because my kids at the time were 7 and 10 years old. And they were doing the video game thing back then. They were like the pioneers of staying inside and playing video games. And I told my wife, oh no, I had a drilling company in Colorado for 17 years and we had just sold it. So we were like in a, like, what do you call that? A gap year type thing. I said, let's go down to Costa Rica. My wife was born in Mexico, raised in the United States. So she spoke Spanish. And I was like, we'll wing it. She can translate for me for a while. I bought property in Nosara.
Right.
And Nosara back then was like, man, it was nothing like it is now. And I started looking for, developing this land I bought right by the beach. And it's called drilling companies. I couldn't get anybody to return my call. Long story short, finally got a guy came out and he wanted a ton of money. And I was like, man, I'll just bring a small rig down and just drill it myself. When I'm done, I'll sell the rig. And I started drilling that well. This is a dinky rig, and I had this guy helping me. And people lined up, I mean, literally lined up down the road in Playa Pilata. Hey, you got a card? Hey, can you come and drill for me? I got no water. And it was just like bling, it
Yep.
seems like people need water here, right? We moved on, and pretty soon the boom came of 2000. We did that for about 4 or 5 years. The boom came, and it had all this money coming into Costa Rica. And I got guys saying, hey, can you drill for me up on this mountain? I'm like, absolutely not. This rig's probably good for, 100 feet, 200 feet. And I believe it or not, two different individuals came up to me and said, how much one of them rigs cost that he can drill up on that mountain? I'm like, I don't know, $500,000 probably. If I get the rig, can we trade and work? I'm like, absolutely.
Wow.
Let's do it. Now, keep in mind, back then, if you asked any geologist, Costa Rican geologist, you asked any government agency, there's zero water in the mountains. That's what they would tell you. There's no water in the mountains. Do not waste your time. There was no well drilled deeper than like 30 meters. So we brought in this big air rig. I worked the deal with this guy, and he had a lot of land. And we kept busy with him for like 3 months, paid off the rig. And we started getting down around 200, 250 meters, and we're getting nervous. And all of a sudden, boom. I mean, we just hit this massive amount of water, and everybody's, happy, right? So that we just discovered something, that was going to be like change our whole aspect of things. So that went great. And then that's when we started getting into geophysics, because we found that we could hit water in one spot, but then move over to the neighbor's property and not hit any water, right? And we were finding places that sometimes it would be a dry hole here, and we move the rig over 1 meter to the south and have water. So we figured out the water's cruising in the veins of the rock and the fractures of the rock.
Yep.
So that's when we really I started getting interested into geophysics. So we invested some money, brought some specialists down, and we started doing geophysical surveys on these properties. And it worked out great. Very labor intensive. You have to stretch out like a kilometer, 1,000 meters of cable across the property, and you have 84 sensors on it. You inject high voltage DC current into the ground. And basically it's a high-tech ohm meter. You collect about 10,000 readings, and you come back with a 2D graph that shows you where the fractures are in the formation. And we started doing that. And it's great. But again, it was very hard to do because a lot of these properties up in the mountains are very steep, and you can't walk them, and you can't stretch cable out. And where we found water, we couldn't get a rig in there. So fast forward, that was we did that for many years, and that's became kind of like a stable here in Costa Rica as far as finding water, one of the most trustworthy ways. Here recently, in the this technology that we're able to use now is using satellite technology, and it's been around for about 20 years. The World Economic Fund put together this technology doing an inventory on the world's groundwater resources. And it was more of an academic resource for providing data. And I think they came up with some astronomical, each country, they put it together in cubic kilometers of water. And Costa Rica has something crazy like, 990,000 trillion cubic kilometers of water. It's huge, the amount of water. What has happened in the last 5 years is that more and more satellites have went up. And now there's 4 private companies that are offering this service for identifying where groundwater is. And we're not looking anymore for the obvious areas where there's water. When I say obvious, we're not looking at areas that are recharged with rainfall. We're not looking at areas that are recharged with the river flows. We're looking at what's called deep-seated water. And the theory is that on the ocean bed, there's a natural reverse osmosis effect that takes place with salt water. And through the fractures of the formation, this water that filters through the formation of the seabed in turn returns back to the mountainous areas, especially of volcanic areas like Costa Rica. And remember, Costa Rica was formed volcanic action.
Yep.
So what we're doing with this technology is that this deep sea, it's not only coming from the ocean bed through reverse osmosis, but it's also coming from deep-seated water that's coming from hydraulic pressure from other groundwater sources that may be higher. Say like a mountain that's higher than the other mountain. That's why if you go to the top of a mountain, sometimes you'll see a natural spring coming out of the top of the mountain.
Yep.
And what you see is like, where's this water coming from? It's because it's coming from a higher pressure source, right? So what, in a nutshell, it's much more complicated than this. These satellites are cruising around. You send us a copy of your plano. We load it up on the Google Earth. We send this remotely to our partnership in Spain. They come back about 5 or 6 days later, and they're able to identify the actual veins that are running through your property. We can identify the depth of the vein. We can identify the amount of water that the vein can produce. We can identify whether it's cold water. We can identify whether it's thermal water. We can identify whether it's steam water to the temperature. Wow. And the way that we're doing that is that we're collecting magnetometry. We're doing resistivity values. We're looking at vegetation history, soil composition, electrical conductivity that are coming from all these different sensors on the satellites. And it's super accurate. They say there's a 95% access or a success rate on it. But the people I'm working with in Spain, they're 2nd generation scientists. Their dads started this, and it's 2 guys. They've never drilled a dry well. So
wow.
When I say this, when I say it's sustainable, is that, Richard, you can go buy a farm now, and before you even close on it, I can tell you how much water is on that property and where you need to drill before you even close on it. And it's very economical, this type of service.
And I'm sure that you could tell me the investment that I'm going to need to make in order to drill to that depth then as well. Because again, the thing with, I had a project a while back where they drilled on it, and they only got to like 50 meters, and like they kind of somewhat ran out of money. And I was like, dude, I think you need to go deeper than that. But like, anyway, then the owner came in afterwards, and I was like, dude, I think if you keep, drilling, you're probably going to get water, and he went down to, I think, about 100 meters and hit water.
Right.
And that's the thing is, a lot of the time you don't know how deep to go, and when to stop, because you just keep putting money in and putting money in and putting money in, as you said. So, I mean, something like this is kind of like an insurance policy.
Oh, definitely. And the nice thing is it's priced in like a 3-tier type system. So, and for instance, you send me the plano, and it costs around $1,300 for me to do an initial study. And I come back with a map, and I show you where the veins are on your property and the characteristics of the veins of water. They're not exact, but they're within 5 meters, because we don't want people to look at these maps and then, go try to drill there, obviously. The second phase is that there's a fee for us to send out a topographer with a high-tech GPS meter and mark that location within 1 millimeter where it needs to be. There's a fee for that. And then the final fee is based off the amount of water that the well produces. And it goes anywhere from 3 liters a second up to 200 liters per second. And we know that. We know that data before we start drilling, because we had the initial report. So these studies can run anywhere from as low as $1,200 to have an idea. And they can go all the way up to like $40,000 or $50,000, depending on the amount of water that the well produces. So it's got Richard, I don't care how good of a businessman you are, when you drill a client a dry well, nobody's happy after that.
Correct. No one is, man. There's a finger pointing going everywhere, Jerry. I
mean, everywhere. I mean, I that's why I'm so passionate about being able to find water, because it's the worst part about my job is having to call somebody and say, look, I know you just spent $20,000, $30,000, but I have to tell you that there's no water.
Jerry, what part are you still able to, are you still able to drill perforated wells in Guanacaste at the moment?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's restricted areas.
Okay, there are restricted areas. I mean, parts of Costa Rica, is there just an abundance of water? And which one would you say that like you need to do some pretty thorough due diligence?
Well, we'll back up. Guanacaste has restricted areas where you cannot drill, but those areas that are restricted is actually where the most water's at.
Right.
And they're doing that for a reason. They're protecting it. Now, areas where it's very difficult to find water is Santa Teresa. Very, very difficult. That's one of the hardest locations. And it's for the type of formation. But it's one of them crazy places again. We drilled a well there back in August of last year, and I don't know, 140 meters. And the lady, she has 3 liters a second coming from the mouth of the well without a pump. It's an artesian well. So we hit that fracture, this vein that what I was talking about. So it's in Santa Teresa is very difficult. I mean, sometimes you can go out there, send a rig out there for a couple months and not find any water, and all of a sudden, get a couple wells. San Juanillo also up in Guanacaste is a little tight. Every area has its areas. There's many areas that you just need to kind of be worried about or be concerned about, not worried about.
Which are areas where you're just like, well, this is going to be easy, guys?
Yeah, well, anything in Guanacaste and Liberia. Lots of water there and real easy drilling. Like when I say lots of water, you can drill wells out there that have over 100 liters per second near the airport.
Wow. Wow. What about in like more, I don't know, southern areas of Costa Rica, Manuel Antonio, the Uvita area, all those areas? Uvita's kind of hit and miss. It seems like there's a couple ridge lines there that it's a little difficult sometimes to find water, but for the majority of the area, it's pretty good. We've had some dry wells there. Hatillo, right outside of Dominical. That is, it seems like the higher you go, the better you are off on water. The lower you go, there's no water. Wow.
Which is kind of backwards, right? And the way that they've kind of analyzed that is that the lower portion is a different type of formation. It's more of like it's a rock, but it's got some clay lenses that are in the fractures, so that's why you're not seeing too much water. So, and we recently ran into some problems finding water on a project in Tinamaste. That's like a local area that's becoming kind of hot. But the property's not big, so we weren't. And keep in mind, these projects that I'm talking about, we haven't done any type of geophysics on them. We just drilled. So, unfortunately, a lot of people do geophysics after they drill the dry well.
I'd probably do it first because that's the cheaper part, right?
But it's so expensive to drill a dry well. They just don't understand,
I know. I mean, having been burnt here in Costa Rica, I do my due diligence thoroughly, dude, now, and since then I've not been burnt, thank God. But I mean, we all have to go through all these processes sometimes, Jerry. It's just, again, your project is only as good as your team. And I've said it on multiple podcasts before. So you just need to make sure you've got a great team.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, Jerry, this has been an amazing podcast, sir. And I think anybody that's looking to develop or buy land here and doesn't have water should should have a conversation with you beforehand.
Definitely.
And definitely, again, doing due diligence is do this initial study here. As you said, I mean, it sounds like a pretty quick turnaround, Jerry.
Oh yes, it's those days of things taking 5 years, and it's absolutely not. Things move quick, and like you said, it depends on your team.
Yep.
Depends on your team. So, it's the days of projects being stretched out for years and years and years gone.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast again. Anyone that wants to get in contact with you, I'll put all of your contact details in the description. But thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you, Richard. Have a great day. I appreciate it. Okay, take care.
Good podcast there with Jerry, guys. I hope you enjoyed that and it didn't get a little bit too technical. I absolutely love the technicality of condominiums and perforated wells and hand dug wells and concessions because, again, it's a little complicated and I always like the complicated. Wherever there's complication, I usually find that there's also value as well. So I hope you enjoyed that. The satellite imagery finding, aquifers is pretty interesting. I've actually got a client up in Guanacaste who had this done and we'll be drilling a well soon. So it's going to be interesting to see whether it actually works or not. I'm almost sure it probably will because, again, Jerry's not going to say it just to say it. And again, drilling a well that runs dry, I mean, that could cost $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, even more sometimes. So putting the, a little bit of money into kind of the studies beforehand is very smart. And just making sure you have the right people on the team as well, just because there have been circumstances where I've seen where people didn't have the right people and ended up spending a ridiculous amount of money when they, if they'd have just taken their time a little bit, spoken to a few people and maybe hired a few experts, they wouldn't have lost as much money. So remember, if you need anything in Costa Rica, you can reach out to us, info@investingcostarica.com. That's info@investingcostarica.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us 5 stars, guys. Please continue to pass the pod. It's great to hear from some of you that you've been sharing it. Thank you very much. And I think last week was actually our largest week of downloads ever. So that's pretty amazing. But appreciate all the support, guys. Thanks very much for everyone listening, and I'll see you on the next podcast. Bye.
The #1 Costa Rica Real Estate and Investment Podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.